Christian parenting.
Aloha, friends. Welcome to the Boy Mom podcast, powered by Christian Parenting. I am Monica Swanson, mom to 4 boys, podcast host, and author of Boy Mom, What Your Son Needs Most from You. Here on the podcast, it's my goal to bring you practical advice and biblical wisdom for raising boys in this sometimes crazy world. You can always find show notes over at monicaswanson.com/podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
I always wondered when parents would tell me that their kids played in the toilet or something like that. I was like, "What are you doing that your kids are made it to the toilet?" And then you have, like, 2 or 3, and you see, like, well, the oldest is peeing and learning how to use the toilet, and so the younger one's, like, crawls over, and they just seem so messy and chaotic compared to your first, but I just think we as parents parent so differently that it makes sense.
Hey, friends. Hope you are doing well. Hope you had a great I almost said Thanksgiving. Hope you had a great Valentine's weekend and that all is well. You were just listening to a short clip from today's interview with Heather MacFadyen, and I'm so excited to share this with you. Most of you probably know Heather from her very popular Don't Mom Alone podcast. Now, Heather's been podcasting for years. She's great. If you haven't checked it out, be sure to use the link in show notes to go over, check out her podcast. Her podcast used to be called the God Centered Mom Podcast. And I'm thinking that might be the first podcast I was ever interviewed on. Either that or Jamie Ivy's The Happy Hour with Jamie Ivy. I just adore Heather. And she's a 4-boy mom and she's smart and fun. And I thought, who better to have join me to kind of continue this conversation about our boys and their personality, what makes them unique. Now, I just wrapped up a couple weeks back, I wrapped up a 3-week series on birth order. If you missed those, I hope you can go back and catch the 3 episodes. I got a lot of really good feedback. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. And it just kind of got me going. And once I get started on these things, I'm like, oh, there's so many other things we could explore. And I thought it would be fun to continue this conversation with Heather. Heather and her husband, Bruce, are kind of experts on the Strength Finders personality test. I think they call it Clifton Strengths these days, but I'm not very familiar with that. So I wanted her to share a little bit from their knowledge on that personality test. And of course, we cover quite a bit today, but there's always more. And so perhaps in future episodes, we can bring up some of the things we don't cover or things we just scratch the surface on today. And I just think it's super interesting. It makes parenting more fun when we have these tools and when we can be students of our children. So I love this conversation. I hope you do too. I don't want to say too much more, but I want to just briefly say thank you, thank you, thank you to those of you who dove in and purchased the character training course last week. I hope you love it. Please stay in touch with me. Let me know how it's going. And if you missed it, no problem. We're going to open doors again this summer. And I think we're going to be adding a couple little special things before the next time we launch it. So if you're already in the course, you can look forward to new additions. And if you haven't purchased it yet, this summer will be a great time to dive in. So thank you again. Thanks for spreading the word about this podcast episode with your friends. Thank you again for the ratings and reviews. If you haven't left one yet, I hope you'll take time to do that today. And now, without further ado, here's Heather MacFadyen and I talking about boys and their personalities and the things we can learn about them to help us to parent them well. Hope you enjoy. Well, hey, Heather, welcome back on the Boy Mom podcast.
Thank you for having me. This is such a fun show to come back to. I love talking
Yes,
about boys and motherhood. Love talking to anyone who has boys older than mine that I can learn from. So let's just have 2 moms here sharing
that's
what
right.
we little we know.
Absolutely. Exactly. The little we know, and we continue to learn all the time from one another and from listeners. And with that, why don't you introduce, tell us how old your boys are and where you are. Anybody that doesn't know you, introduce yourself.
I live in Dallas, Texas, and I have 4 boys. The oldest is 15 and then 13, 11 and a half today. Don't forget those
Mm,
halves. And then
House.
8, almost 9. So, yeah. I mean, yeah, and I was with a group of boy moms this morning because we're reading through your book, and it is such an encouragement to
Mhm.
gather other boy moms together and just kind of commiserate through the challenges, and today we were talking through boundary setting and giving freedom, but yet, doing that wisely, and it's not easy to navigate, so,
No. Oh, I'm honored
gosh,
though. Wow.
yes,
Thanks. Blushing over
yes.
here.
Well, I mean, y'all, you haven't read the book, which hopefully you have, and that's why you're here, but super helpful.
Yeah. Thank you. I love that. And 15, I saw a picture of the 15-year-old like driving a car, I think.
Yeah, I was trying to be so brave in that picture. Oh, man,
Goodness.
when he said, "Hey, can I drive, over to my friend's house with you?" And I thought, he's only driven really with Bruce in the front seat, my husband.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, sure, yeah, that'd be great. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Ah,
Should we ride
it
in the
is
bigger car?
wild.
I feel like we need to be in the bigger car, but
In a
he did
tank.
great. He did
You need something really safe. No,
yeah.
they're ready. It's hard. It's harder on us moms than it is on them. So wait, what's the laws there? Do they get their permit at 15 and a half?
15, and then,
Oh,
they
15.
license at 16, but they have to have
Okay.
6 months of driving before they get their license.
Yes. Yes. Same here in Hawaii. And it was interesting. My third son got his driver's license in the middle of the pandemic, and it was a crazy process. Everything was different, but he made it. So I now have three drivers in the family.
Oh my
Mm,
gosh. Oh my
it's pretty weird.
gosh. Yeah,
Yeah.
man.
And all your kids are in school again, right? They've been there all year, you said.
Yeah, I mean, just thankful to live in Texas, and, they all attend private schools that are smaller, and so they could manage the rules of social distancing and stay in person, which is really a gift, and I grieve for all the moms if you're listening and that is not your story. It is really hard. It's hard for them, and I know that, we have the homeschooling moms and they've
Mhm.
chosen to stay home,
Chosen the crazy
but
life.
even that, I was homeschooled from 3rd to 8th grade, and you do so much with other families
You
that
do.
it is hard.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It is. It's been quite a year, and I am looking forward to the new year and seeing what we have ahead of us. So I'm excited that you could join us today because we are just wrapping up this mini series about birth order. Because I just love to talk about all these things. And what I have found is when I start to focus on being a student of my sons, learning about them, about their personalities, about their birth order, when there's little things that you can kind of tune into and maybe read about and learn about and talk to friends about, it kind of gives your job, your parenting job, more meaning, right? I don't know if you found that.
Well, you're talking to a speech language pathologist who specialized in 0 to 3. So 0 to 3 was my jam. Like, those
Mm.
little years,
Mhm.
I came alive. I knew every single developmental stage, and so I was all about that season. I see so much value if you're a mom of kids that age. It's so fun to unwrap that. I think about the biblical characters of Samuel and Moses, who they probably only had 5 years with their moms, and they went on to be these amazing men of God, and so I just really love those little years and
Mhm.
struggle more now.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I think, so much of that time was me helping them be really good communicators, but not necessarily seeing the uniqueness in them. So I love you highlighting, like, what makes one respond differently to the same situation the other. And the more kids you have, like you and I were saying earlier, people will talk about, "Oh, that's such a boy thing to do." And
Mhm.
I have 4 different versions of a boy.
Amen. Yep.
So
Yep.
they could
Very
be in that
different.
same scenario and respond completely differently. And so instead of getting frustrated, really thinking through why are they doing that has been helpful for me to not take it personally, not feel like I'm not disciplining correctly or there's something wrong in their character. So yeah, I think studying them and learning more about personalities and birth order and all of those things just helps, I think, release this burden of creating a robot child or a robot boy.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely, and it helps us not compare too much, and, oh, I love that so much, and yeah, just think between the 2 of us, there are 8 very unique boys. I mean, no 2 of my boys are alike, and I just think, wow, think of those families that have, like, lots and lots of kids. They're still gonna be different. It's just amazing. It's just like God looking down on all of his children and how very unique we are from one another. So, oh, it's super fun. Well, I'm curious since we're wrapping up the birth order series here as this comes out. have your kids fit? I mean, you've got your 4 are closer together. I had 3 in a row, which means I felt like they were a really good study in birth order. And then I had the 6.5 year gap before number 4. But your 4, tell me how they kind of landed in the birth order, kind of typical description of birth order.
So when I was reading your descriptions, I think it's funny how I don't f I've come to realize my second is way more responsible than my first.
That happens
And
sometimes.
that yeah,
Mm.
so that piece hasn't panned out. I could see how some of the birth order the having 4 close, I basically get 2 middle kids.
Mhm.
So and they're probably the ones that can be the most challenging behavior-wise because they're pretty strong in leadership and desires, and the bookends are much more flexible in their thinking and
Mm,
easygoing, and
mm.
so
Yeah.
it's just I mean, those kind of aspects, I think middle kids being quote unquote "hard," mine fit into
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
birth order,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
synopsis, but I don't
Yeah.
know that, like, a lot of the things line up for my crew.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Interesting. And your first 2 are about 2 years apart, right?
Mhm,
Like
just
mine?
less, yeah. Mhm.
Okay. And how about in your family of origin, Heather? What position are you?
So I'm 3rd, but there are 11 years between my older brother and me, and
Oh,
16
wow.
years between my older sister and me. So it's
Wow.
like 2 families. So I'm
Yeah.
a
So you're
kind
an
of a
only
middle
child.
oldest. Yeah. Well, I have a
Yeah.
younger brother who's 2 years younger.
Oh, there we go.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm. So yeah,
That is
2 sets.
fascinating. So do you feel like the oldest, like if firstborn kind of personality in yourself?
Ish. Ish, I would say. I mean, there can be some, like, desires for perfectionism and performance that I think oldest kids fall under, and I definitely see that even for my oldest son, like, just really wanting to do well and be approved of. I think I always wondered when parents would tell me that their kids played in the toilet or something like that. I was like, What are you doing that your kids are made it to the toilet?" And then you have, like, 2 or 3, and you
Yeah.
see, like, well, the oldest is peeing and learning how to use the toilet, and so the younger
Uh-huh.
one's, like, toddle like, crawls
Splash.
over, and they just seem so messy and chaotic compared to your first, but I just think we as parents parent so differently that it makes sense that some of that behavior that we would say, "Oh, they're just so wild," or, "Oh, they're so challenging." It's like or you just have a lot of kids and you aren't micromanaging like you used to where they have to
Exactly.
perform, you know?
Yes, I'm having a memory pop into my head now of when my firstborn was probably 5. And clearly, in his early years, he saw mom want things tidy and organized, I guess, as kind of my coping mechanism for just the crazy. And so I remember when a guest would come to our house, my 5 year old, even though I had 2 little ones, and they're doing whatever, he would all of a sudden start like tidying. Like he would start moving things around and like organizing the house. And it was so awkward and embarrassing because I'd have a guest standing there while this little guy's going around. And I thought, this is weird. But I think it was his firstborn thing. Like, this is what my mom wants. She wants order. So now someone's in the house. I'm going to make sure everything's orderly. And I was like, would you stop cleaning the house? You're but yeah, it's funny how we don't realize that the things we're doing, that the season we're in actually does affect and shape our kids and how they, get along in life. So, not to put too much pressure on ourselves, but it's kind of funny to step back and see it later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ah,
So funny.
okay. Well, I love this and I love the topic of birth order, but there are so many other tools out there that I would love to talk about. And I'm sure in the future, I'm going to do more episodes focusing in or bringing in some authors of books on these things. But Strength Finders is something that you and your husband, Bruce, talk about. I think he might be the expert. And I have the Strength Finders book. I feel like maybe once I took an online test, but I haven't really delved deep into it. So can you enlighten us a little bit about what Strength Finders is? Do you recommend it and how it's helped your family?
Yeah, so Bruce discovered it as a COO of companies as a way to kind of help with management as a neutral language to talk about behaviors. So there are 34 different strengths. And I guess now it is not called Strength Finders, it is called Clifton's Strengths. They like to
Oh,
change things
wow.
up, right?
They do.
So
Yes.
the guy that created it, Clifton is his last name,
Okay.
He actually is part of the Barna research group, so they,
Ooh.
they give out
Yeah.
surveys, and they've done a lot of work even with how kids have left the faith, and one of my favorite books, Revolutionary Parenting, was put out by Barna on, like, how do we create, followers of Jesus that keep the faith. It's really good.
Okay,
It's
say
really good.
say that title again.
Revolutionary Parenting. So
Revolutionary.
they basically surveyed adults who grew up in homes of faith, and these, they called them revolutionary believers or something, that
Mm,
are still choosing to follow
yeah,
Jesus as adults, and what was
good.
they looked for common threads in what their
Ooh,
families were like growing up. Anyway,
okay, that's going in my
yeah,
Amazon cart.
yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
So he's part of that, and Clifton decided to, instead of just focusing on what's not right and what you need to get better at, what would it look like if instead we focused in on what we're already doing well and kind of helped shape those things? And so, uh, the book that you're talking about, there's a Strength Finders 2.0. There might be a new book, Clifton Strengths, but it comes with a test. And when you take it, they'll give you your top 5 out of the 34. And you can pay to get all 34 in order. It's more expensive than the cost of the book, but that can be helpful because then you see which of the 34 are in your bottom
I was
5.
gonna say that would be fascinating too.
So Bruce and I have taken it, and the
Ooh,
strength of being deliberative is in our bottom 5 for both of us.
both of you. Oh,
So neither
wow.
of us think through things and do all the research and figure it all out, before coming to a decision. So that's good for us because we kinda have to force ourselves to
Uh-huh.
be deliberative in making
I like
decisions.
that.
Yeah.
I like
Mhm.
that. And are your top strengths similar or
They
different?
are. They are a little similar. I mean, there are variations, and the more learning he's done as a coach, even the order of those 5 makes an impact on, how they manifest. So, for me, input is number 1, and that strength versus there's another strength that's learner. So an input strength is a breadth of information. Like I'm the one who's I love Instagram because I'm learning from so many different places. So I'm going broad and I'm learning lots of different things. But a learner is going deep on one topic. So they may be like, okay, I want to learn more about, oh, who knows? I mean, in my brain, I thought the election process. So let's say they want to go real deep on what are the ins and outs of all of that. I'm going to do all the research and just learn all that, and maybe even learn a language, and maybe learn how to build a computer. And they're just going to go real deep. And I'm
That's my
going,
husband.
yeah, and I'm
Yeah,
going real
can't
broad.
sleep at night because he saw something mentioned about, ancient African tribe, and now he can't sleep because he's reading, like, articles,
Yes,
upon article. Yeah,
yes,
that's
and that's
okay.
a strength, and that's why he's a doctor. So because he loves learning, and that helped him
Oh,
become a
I
doctor.
guess so.
Yeah,
I guess
yeah,
so.
but it can But see, with every strength, there's a balcony, like our best, how that
Okay.
manifests, being a doctor, and a
Yep.
basement, staying
Ooh,
up
this is
late and,
interesting.
like,
Yes.
not getting the sleep we need to be able to be the
Right.
doctor that we need to be. So, it's every like, input, it can be bad in that I take in all this information, and that can cloud my ability to actually make a decision, or I have too much in my head, and so I can't focus, so I don't know how to edit it well. And I'm, like, weighing all the different sides all the time. So, every single strength has a balcony and basement, and I think what happens with our kids is God made them with these strengths and different some people would say if you take Strength Finders or Clifton Strengths, it's gonna be the same top 5 every time you take it. I haven't found that to be true. I think they move around a lot, so, take it or leave it with that, but in general, God gave our kids and made them wired to be strong in certain things. And there is the nurturing, like we were just talking about earlier in the conversation, but there's the nature of they are born with these strengths. And I think when they're little, and we talk about this sometimes with when it comes to leadership, it is hard to parent a leader. They are
Yeah.
very um,
Yes.
adamant and pushing back.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that is not fun to parent, but when they get into middle school, when they get into high school, and I'm seeing the fruit of it now, those strengths are just fantastic because they do have an internal drive. They know where they wanna go, they know how they wanna do it, and you aren't having to steer the ship as much or manage that because
Right.
they are older and can do that, and they're
Yep.
not
Yep.
your agenda is not clashing with their agenda as much. So that,
So good.
that's where overall that's what strengths are. Now, of the 34, there are 4 domains that all the strengths fall into. One of the domains is executing. So what's helpful is if you take it and you look and you see, wow, a lot of my strengths fall into the category of executing. That's informative. That kind of tells you like you're someone who's going to get stuff done. Then there's a category of influencing. That's someone who obviously is good at like changing the people around them. They
Mm.
are maybe very self-assurance, or
Mhm.
they have competition or communication, or they are an activator. They get things done. That is influential to the people around them. The next one is relationship building. So there are several that fall under relationship building: connectedness, empathy, harmony, includer, positivity, relator. Those all fall into relationship building. Strategic thinking, these are the people that may be the CEOs, and they are very analytical, futuristic, um, intellection, learner, strategic. They are looking at the bigger picture and they're helping know where the ship's going to go. And so
Okay.
that's an overview. I don't know if
Wow,
that's
this is good.
helpful.
I'm writing lots of notes, and now I wanna go retake the test because 'cause it's been some time. So you're saying whatever your top strengths are gonna fit into those
4
kinda
categories.
domains.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm, mhm.
So and I'm like, I wonder if there's it seems like some of them have a like, I was thinking, "Oh, definitely, I think I would be in the influencer kind of what do you call it? Influencing
Yeah,
influencing domain." But then I was like, "Wait, relationship building, no." So I'm excited to go retake that,
yeah,
and I could see
yeah.
where it'd
So
be really
my
good for kids.
Yeah, and so there is a kids version, but
Oh, cool.
I think it's not as good.
Okay.
And
Sure.
so, honestly, I think if they're 10, 11, and up, they could probably take the traditional strengths finders. It definitely helps if you're a family that's talked about things and they're more familiar of how they function. They would be able to answer the questions unique to themselves versus just doing what they think you want them
Yeah,
to do and say.
definitely.
Uh
Yeah, so your kids have taken this, I assume?
Yeah, yeah. So my older 2 have taken it, and I just think it really helped us recognize, particularly with my second, he is a very futuristic thinker and he likes to have a plan. And so where some of the rub might be on a vacation is he just wants to know what we're doing. And because we're outside of our traditional structured routine, he feels a little out of sorts. So what we had to do was we would, as a family, decide what are some things we want to do on this vacation. And then we would look to our second son and say, will you plan out
Oh,
our
look at
days?
you. Yeah.
Because Bruce and I are not deliberative. We're not going to do that. So
Yeah,
we're just going
you're
to
like, "You're
respond.
handy."
Yeah. And so,
Yeah.
and then he feels in charge. And then, we're not going to have this battle of like, we have made a plan and he's doesn't think it's the right one. He's actually very good at being efficient and thinking through things. And so if I let him problem solve instead of pushing against it, life actually goes a little better, and it gives him ownership, it makes him feel like his I've always heard kids need to know their belonging in your home, and I think the more we lean into these strengths and it's just this neutral language instead of a negative
Oh,
thing where you're like, "Oh, you're
yes.
such a blah, blah, blah," and not
Uh-huh.
boxing kids in, but more
Yes.
identifying things that you're
Mhm.
seeing they're good at and building it up. It,
Mm.
helps them know their place in your
I love
home
that.
and with your crew.
I love that. Oh, and that's so good. Even if your second born doesn't have all the second born or middle child characteristics, I do think that's something that in my birth order episode about middle children, that's something that's so important for them is to feel like they have a voice. And, my son will say that when he was young, he often felt like all the noise from the older brother and, the attention seeking of the younger brother, and he felt like he didn't always have a voice, and so I love that you found a way to really use that strength to give him a little job, and I think that's great.
A couple years ago, we pulled out a document and Bruce kind of decided to manage them like his companies
I
and
love it.
decide what their goals they wanted to reach that quarter were and what roles they were going to be given in our home, whether it's areas of the house, specific responsibilities, even related to dinner cleanup, like you're the clear the table guy, you're the put in the dishwasher guy, or instead of it just being considered a chore, it's kind of like, "This is your role in our home. and our home functions if you do your role. And
Wow. Okay,
then
that's so cool.
we noticed, like you were talking about, how some boys' voices were louder and stronger, and so our second son is can be very forceful, and so his opinion on where we eat, what movie we watch, where we get pizza was, like, every weekend. It was his decision, and so I heard this from one of my guests. She would, take the month and split it up. So, like, the first weekend of the month, my oldest son, that's his. If there's a choice to be made, he's the one making the choice. Whether we get pizza, what movie we watch, and where we go to lunch after church. And then the next weekend, it's my second son, third weekend, my third son. And so we'll just say, "Whose weekend is it?"
Ah,
And then it's
so good.
like a instead of this battle,
Yes. Oh, that's
and the
totally
quiet
saves.
personalities,
Ah,
they get a chance to kind of, and we also have to learn how to not respond negatively at the other person's choice.
yeah, right.
Because the more dominant ones, they're gonna have a spouse someday and kids someday.
Yeah.
You don't want them, like, bulldozing their families with this
Yeah.
really strong opinion.
So true. We've had that conversation more than once around here. So, oh, this is so good. I love it. And I'm going to pull
So I
out my
think
Strength Finders book.
well, and I think sometimes too, what happens is those stronger strengths do get recognized, whereas some of the I don't know, my word for 2021 before I even started doing the Strength Finder stuff on our Patreon, my word that God led me to was strength. And the realization he gave me was oftentimes what we view as strengths are these, I don't know, more out loud, outgoing, like we are just saying, strategic strengths. And I felt like things that I was strong in when I was younger, things like empathy, things like sensitivity, were downplayed as strengths. And
Yes. Because they're quieter strengths,
they're
right?
quiet strengths, and
Mm,
so really owning how God made me and seeing that as valuable is what I'm leaning into this year, and that helping people find language around their emotions, helping people work through past hurts and pains, that's my strength. And it doesn't have to be on a stage, and it doesn't have to be kind of blast in front of everyone on social media. It's something that I'm up and doing in my community that's, you know, I am allowing God to work through me, and it's his power at work through me, and that's strong. And so I think for some of our kids, there might be some amazing things that they're really good at that are not being noticed because especially if you have more than 2 children, they they're kind of
yeah.
they're
Oh, for sure.
dismissed or
Mhm.
missed, you know?
Yes,
Not
yes.
intentionally often, and so we have one of those kiddos, and he loves animals. And he was having a really hard time where, uh, even with friendships, just speaking poorly of himself and about himself, and
Yeah.
so I just, at bedtime, prayed with him. I said, "You know what? It's hard when other people are labeling you, that we always wanna listen to their labels, but I'd love if we just listened to what God wants to say about you and who he says you are." And I said, "Let's just pray together." And so we just I said, "God, would you please tell," and I said my son's name, "who he is and who you say he is." And so we're just really quiet and still, and I said, "If you," before that, I said, "If something comes into your head, I want you to say it, and if it is, you know, not against what God says in the Bible or condemning, then it is from God and it is for you." And I heard caretaker in my head, and so I just prayed out loud. I said, "Lord, thank you that you made him a caretaker, that he is good at caring for those things around him." And before I could even finish the sentence, his eyes popped open. He said, "I'd heard that too." Like, he
No.
just
Aw.
felt confirmed that we went before
Ah,
the Lord and said, "Let's hear who God made you to be,"
I
instead of
love
looking
that.
at any other identifiers or labels.
Wow, that is so awesome. Identity and who God created our kids to be is something else that maybe I'll have you back on to talk about because I just love this. But what a neat way to pray with your son over that and to let him hear from God himself. Let the Holy Spirit speak to his heart. And did that kind of change things after that?
Yeah, I think anytime then that he would start saying negative words again, I'm like, "Oh, let's
Mhm.
remember, who did God say you were?"
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Let's lean back into
So
that and then
cool.
speak that. And I think that's helpful too if you look at the Clifton's strengths list for you to have in mind. The 34 strengths. So as you're observing and studying your kids, you can recognize and have language for that. Um,
Absolutely.
if they
Yes.
just take action and do something before you ask them to do it, and where that might be a negative, in some respects, you could just say, "Wow, you're such an activator." Without anyone
Mm,
having to tell you what to do, you just take
mhm.
action. And I
Yes.
know that someday you're gonna take action when God says go, you're gonna go and
Yeah.
do. Or you're
Isn't
such
that
an
good?
includer. Like wherever you are, you're inviting people to play whatever game you're playing at the park. Um,
Right.
yeah, I think it allows us to have some language to use.
Super good. I want my whole family to check it out now. So thank you for sharing all that with us.
Of course.
Hey guys, hope you're enjoying this conversation. Now, I want to pause real quick to thank this episode's sponsor, which is the Dive Homeschool Curriculum. Now, Dive is a college preparatory, self paced math and science curriculum with expert video instruction, video solutions, auto grading, so helpful, and Q&A support. Now, if you followed me for long or checked out my homeschool page, which I will link to in our show notes, you know that my boys have used Dive curriculum for their math and science classes for years. My college boys took AP tests and passed them, and now they're studying in the maths and sciences in college, and they feel very well prepared because of Dive. Now we're also super blessed here that Dr. Shorman, the man behind Dive, though he's a Texas guy, a Texas A&M guy, his family has moved here to our North Shore, so we know them personally, and we can say we have so much respect for Dr. Shorman and are so grateful for him both online and off. And now Luke's going to share a couple words about Dive and Dr. Shorman as well.
Hey guys, Luke here. I've been taking Dive online math and science classes for about 4 years now, and in that time I've learned so much. Although Dr. Shorman's teaching abilities are second to none, the character he exhibits and the spiritual knowledge I've gained through his curriculum will never leave me. Find out more at diveintomath.com or press the link in the show notes.
There's a couple other tools I thought we would just touch on. I know one thing that I haven't pulled out the book in a while, but love languages is
Yeah.
another helpful. As parents, we have such an opportunity to tune in, and it doesn't take a ton of work, but it takes just kind of noticing what really lights them up. How do they express love, and then how do they receive love? And so I think the Five Love Languages book has been really helpful. Is that one you've also checked out?
Yeah, that's been a helpful thing in marriage and with our kids and something we
Marriage
talk
too.
about, like,
Yeah.
what do you like best? Do you like when someone does something for you? Do you like when they say something nice to you? Do you like when they spend time with you? Do you like when they hug you? Do you like when they give you something? And I think that was helpful for my oldest son, where, that whole entitlement, negativity around entitlement and wanting more stuff. I think what I recognized is my oldest son really loves gifts, and it does
Mhm.
not
Yeah.
have to be a high value item. It could be
Right.
a napkin. It could
Yeah.
just be that you thought to pick
You
him up
took the time.
a cake
Mhm.
pop or something, like, it
Yes.
does not have to be a high ticket item, and I I don't think I there might have been times I spoke negatively about that to him, thinking, "As a good mom, I wanna shape his character, and it's not about getting more stuff, and why do you keep wanting more stuff?" And, you and I were talking about "Don't Mom Alone," like, the power of doing that even in this conversation, and I found it useful when I was talking to a mom friend, a mentor of mine, and I was explaining a situation with that son, and she was able to reframe and help me see, like, what was actually the gift and what was actually
Yes.
the perspective he was bringing. So I'd made
Yes.
chocolate covered strawberries while they were taking their naps,
Mhm.
and when they woke up, I thought they would be like, "Oh my goodness, this is so amazing. Praise mom, praise mom."
Yeah.
And instead, his first response was, "How many do I get?"
Right.
And I was so frustrated, like, what
Sure.
a jerky thing to ask. "How many do you get?"
Yeah.
And she very quickly, without, like, jumping on my bandwagon of, "Oh, yeah, that's such a horrible thing," she was like, "Well, maybe he's a planner, and he's seeing all of those out there, and he's wondering
Mhm. Yeah.
who gets what." And you know what?
So
That kid
good.
is such a planner. He
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Whereas
She nailed it.
yeah, and some people would say fearful, like, he's a lot of worries, it's really that he's planning for any potential thing to go wrong, and he's thinking through every scenario, and that might be a firstborn thing too, but he just really is considering and has a great imagination of all that could possibly
Yes.
go wrong and wants to be
Mhm,
ready for it.
mhm,
And so,
mhm.
we were even just looking at houses and he's like, "Oh, this would be great because if I ever forget anything at school, I could quickly get home," whereas now it's like a 20-minute drive. So, I just think
I love it.
yeah, I just think where I would've, yeah, negatively labeled him as a worrier or entitled. I think we have to be careful to overly I don't know,
Yeah,
add
criticize our kids when
criticize
yeah, if we
with
just
character
understood.
flaws, like it's a character
Yeah,
flaw instead of saying, "Okay,
yeah,
what is this communicating actually? And can I
sure.
view it positively to see maybe it is a strength that needs to be shaped and formed?"
Shaped. I was gonna say, we
Yeah,
can still kinda help coach them
yeah,
along,
yes,
but to
yes.
recognize in that moment, we don't need to, come down too hard, and I have found that even with love languages, my 4th son, just my all my boys were like, when they were young, they would write me little love notes a lot, like little, "I love you, mommy," and just whatever. And my 4th son is I could probably count on one hand how many little notes he's ever written me. And I'm thinking, for a minute there, I was like, "Wow, he's just doesn't love me,"
I lost my gift somewhere between the 3rd
yeah,
and the 4th. Yeah.
totally. Absolutely, and then I was like, "But wait, I have probably sat and snuggled that kid and scratched his back." I mean, physical touch must be his love language because he just wants to be touched all the time. And so it helps me to recognize, and not be have hurt feelings, and also to tune in. And this is going to make him feel loved. Like I could give him a gift, and it probably won't do a whole lot for him. But if I sit and scratch his back and snuggle, then that's going to make him feel really loved. And for anyone who hasn't, I just have the little list here. I think the Five Love Languages book is great, and the five love languages are acts of service, physical touch, words of encouragement, gifts, and quality time. So like you said, that helped me early on in my marriage, and I do think some of these shift a little with the seasons cuz sometimes I'm like, well, I think my love language in my marriage at least is acts of service because right now I'm in a time where if you just do something for me, it really helps. Like I feel super loved.
Well,
I don't
Bruce
know if
would
that's
say
my
that oftentimes it's the one that I'm not getting that's my love language,
Oh yeah.
that
Uh-huh.
I actually
Sure.
have all 5, and
Yes,
whatever's the
exactly.
least is what I notice.
100%. Yes. I totally concur with that.
Yeah, no, but I
I
think
love
that
it.
noticing what they're not just how they're receiving love, but how they're giving love and how they uniquely do that is helpful. So,
Yes,
mhm,
yes,
mhm.
and your story about your son there and, describing him made me think of one other tool,
Yeah.
personality
No, it
tool.
made me think of it too. So
Because 'cause
there's
I'm
a
gonna make a
tool.
guess at his Enneagram number, right?
Yes, okay,
Talk.
tool, and she just said the word, and I know that for some of you that you have already filtered that as, like, a no-no word, and I have a podcast, and that word has come up from guests, Enneagram, and I get the emails, and there's a lot of concern, and that is I'm thankful that people are being discerning, and just like anything that's 500 years old, thousands of years old, it can be twisted and it can come from, wrong places and wrong motives. Even Christ was twisted for the benefit of the church, still. So, I think with everything we bring caution, um, I mean, water is super dangerous if
Mhm.
not handled correctly. Fire, if
Yes.
it's out of control, is a problem. So
Yeah.
with all that caveat,
Yes.
I think that what Enneagram has helped me do, and I love Beth McCord. If you want a biblically sound, gospel based expert, Beth McCord is super strong biblical roots in how she approaches the Enneagram and how it brings us back to Christ. And so I just want to say all that. But yeah, the Enneagram, what would you think his number would be?
He's a 6.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, the
My
planners.
youngest is as well. Mhm.
Mhm, mhm,
Yep,
and
and worst case
yep,
scenarios and yeah.
mhm,
Mhm. Prepared.
and really loyal to their friends. There's a lot of positives, but I think if you're unfamiliar with Enneagram, there are 9 different ways to see and interpret the world and how you respond to it, and that may seem really limiting, like, 9? You just talked about 34 strengths, why only 9? And I think what is helpful is it is not a box, like, you are that way. Like, you are that number, and that is all you are. Um, it is you have healthy versions of that number and unhealthy versions of that seeing, and you have stress reactions where you move into another number, and there have healthy reactions where you move into other parts, and you have wings is what they sometimes say, and so that's like pulling from the ones on either side of you. And someone said it's like a set of glasses. So my 4 boys could be in the same exact situation and see and interpret and respond completely differently based on this tool, Enneagram. And like we keep saying tool, it's Beth McCord uses this language like it's not a weapon to say, "Oh, you're such a 6, always worrying about everything."
Yeah.
It's not a weapon of a sword to hurt someone with. It's not a shield for him to say, "Well, this is why I do this. I'm such a 9, I'm such a sloth, I'm just lazy, I don't do anything." It's not a
Right.
shield to like just stay in a a place of hurting others or harming yourself. And it's a flashlight to help guide the way along the road. And so I think I've heard that it's not a tool to be used to categorize kids because they're still in process and you don't want to narrow their experience long term. But I did hear Suzanne Stabile, she wrote The Road Back to You with Ian Cron. She
Mhm.
talked about stances, and I felt like that was really helpful
Yeah,
and
I want
kind
you to
of
talk about that because this
yeah.
is new to me. I hadn't read that part,
So if
and,
you yeah,
yeah.
you can take the 9 different types and you can break them down into 3 different stances. And she said if, without giving your kids an Enneagram test or deciding which type they are, knowing which stance they hold is helpful in how you interact with them because really it doesn't change who they are, but it just changes maybe how you parent them. And so the 3 stances are: 1 is aggressive, and the 2 is dependent, and then the 3rd one is withdrawn. So withdrawing or withdrawn. So that's like if you're in a situation, and like I talked about my second son, he is coming at us with information, and sometimes with such intensity that it can feel like an assault to me. And that word
Mhm.
aggressive often has a negative connotation, but they just come at life, they come at a
Mm.
task, they are not
Yep.
deterred, and that
Mm.
would be if you're looking at numbers, that's 3, 7, and 8 on the Enneagram
Yep.
are the aggressive stance. And then you have the withdrawn stance. So you have those kids that when everything's kind of going awry in your home or there's a challenge, they might withdraw and they might need time to process it internally, to deal with it, to think through it. And it's not a rejection of you if you're the parent thinking, "Oh my gosh, they keep going to their room every time something happens," or when they get home from school, they keep going to their room. They may need be going to their room to decompress from a
Mhm.
long day, and that is
Yep.
a place that it helps them. It's not that they hate their family, it's not that they don't love you, it's just that's how they function best. And that those numbers are 4, 5, and 9. That's easier for me to
Mm.
remember because 4 plus 5 equals 9.
Yep, and oh, this is fun. I'm thinking of
Yes.
members of my family
Yeah.
here. Okay,
So
keep
then the
going.
last stance, the dependent stance, they rely on those around them. So they are gonna
Mhm.
wanna talk through things. They're gonna wanna process with you. They're dependent maybe on the mood of the environment or dependent on the actual environment being ordered or clean. Like the 2 is very dependent on everyone being at peace. The 6 is very dependent with there being just a sense of control and dependent on those relationships for security. So 1, 2, and 6 are the dependent stance.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness, that's so interesting. My 4th son is, I mean, it's kind of comical. He's literally glued to his older brother, who's a full 6.5 years older, but he is so loyal. I mean, when Luke gets out of the water from a surf contest, Levi is waiting on the beach and like literally connected to him and will sit on his lap and be wrapped around him. And he's 10 now, so maybe he's about to outgrow that, but it's just so cute. But he just fits all of those. And to hear, and I think even if somebody's not into the Enneagram, just these 3 stances can be helpful. Just knowing that some kids are going to be a little bit bit more aggressive. My second son is an Enneagram 8. He's a leader. He's very strong, and he has a louder voice. Like, we're always going, Jonah, quiet down. But the fact is, in speech and debate, he crushed it. He was
Yeah,
great. God is going to use that.
yeah.
But to see these three different stances in our kids can just be a helpful tool. And again, you named many things that the Enneagram is not. And, for me, certainly it is not. I don't look at it personally as a religion or a spiritual thing. In
No,
fact, I
no.
confess that I've really only looked at it on the surface level. And I know that if you go deep into it,
It can be twisted. Yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
But I have just found that knowing just those 9 different personality types, it has been so helpful, especially as my kids have gotten older. And I admit I have labeled them young, so I probably shouldn't have, but I couldn't help it. But my college boys, it was so helpful for my oldest son as he was graduating high school when we discovered all this. And he was like, this helps me understand my relationship with my brothers so much better, and why this area has been hard, and how I can do better at responding because of who I am and who he is. So again, tools,
Yeah.
conversations,
I think
I
it's
just
it's
love it.
extremely helpful in giving grace in relationships, and if
Yes.
anything is helping me give grace and understanding and connecting me with other people, I think that I look for where is God showing fruit, and yes, any tool can be twisted and it can be negative, and the enemy would definitely doesn't wants to keep us trapped in that, but if I'm seeing it connect me with people, connect me with parents, my own parents, or my spouse or my children, I don't see that as the enemy's work. He's not
Yeah.
someone to do that. He is
Right.
someone to divide, and I'm seeing social
Mhm.
media do that, or people
Yep.
on social media, not the actual tool itself, but you can twist
Right.
anything and
Yes,
make
you
it cause
can.
division, and so I appreciate the discernment, but I also do
Yeah.
appreciate how that has helped our crew.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes, and find the thing that fascinates you, that's interesting, that's helpful, and learn more about it, and stop when you feel like it's getting in the way of other things. And well, Heather, this is, I wish I lived near to you and we could just get together and watch each other's boys and laugh and share
Ugh,
stories
I
because
wished I lived close to you. Are we joking? Why would you pick Dallas compared to Hawaii? Oh my gosh. Although I would say
okay,
40-foot waves, I was like, I mean, I'm
yeah.
all about my kids having adventures, but I don't know about 40-foot waves.
Monica, yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a little crazy, but hopefully that will mellow out soon. It's always an exciting winter around here for sure. Well, I love what you do. I love that you encourage us all to not mom alone, to don't mom alone, and that we need each other. So hopefully everyone listening can have a friend to chat with about all this stuff. Can start some conversations with your spouse, with your kids, really learn about one another. I think in marriage, all this stuff is so helpful as well. So hopefully, this is just a good conversation starter for all of you listening. And Heather, where can people find you if they don't happen to be following you already? If they want to hop on right now and track you down, where can they find you?
On all the places, it's don't mom alone. Don't
So
mom
easy.
alone. Yeah, without the apostrophe.
Right. Yes. Yes. Exactly. Well,
Uh,
this has been so much fun. And I will link to anything. I've been jotting notes like crazy. So anything that's come up, I will be linking to in our show notes. And I just want to thank you so much for your time with
Yeah, of
us.
course, and if y'all wanna join us for more talk about Strength Finders, with Bruce, he joins me on our Patreon. If you go to
Ooh.
patreon.com/. Don't Mom Alone, we've been doing a series. We just did the first one in January, but we're gonna narrow in on how Strength Finders helps our marriages and our parenting and even our career, so join us
Okay.
over
Can
there.
I ask if we join now, can we
You can
still
watch the other
catch the
one. Yeah.
January one?
Mhm, mhm. It's all
Okay.
saved.
Guess where
Yeah.
I'm heading when we're
Yeah,
done here?
yeah.
Woo. I'm excited. Thank you.
Oh,
And
thank
thanks
you.
to Bruce.
Well, thank you
Okay.
for
Well,
taking time to chat with me and invite me onto your show. It's always fun to be a guest on someone else's show.
it is so much fun having you. God bless you. And we'll get you back here another time.
Okay, sounds good.
Aloha. Hey, friends, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. And as always, there are lots of links and notes over at the show notes at monicaswanson.com episode 94. And if you just want to search up an old episode, you can always go to monicaswanson.com/podcast and find a list of all the episodes. And there's also a little search bar on my website where you can look up topics, old episodes, anything else. I got 10 years of archives over there, so don't be a stranger, okay? Now, I also want to just reiterate what Heather already said, and that is that we are not endorsing a deep dive into the Enneagram or anything else except the Word of God and His truth. Just from my own experience, as I have learned a little bit more about the Enneagram over time, I've definitely taken a cautious approach. But with the little knowledge I have, surface level knowledge of the 9 types, it has been interesting and a helpful tool for my family. But again, just take it all with a grain of salt. Hope you appreciate and enjoy the tools that work for you. And I just want to tell you guys, we have so many great interviews and topics planned for the weeks and months ahead. So I hope you will stick around. Please tell your friends about the Boy Mom podcast. And always feel free to send me requests for topics or interviews at aloha@monicaswanson.com. Thanks so much for being here, guys. Have a wonderful rest of your week. And until next time, aloha.